In the shadowed corridors of history, where whispers echo louder than decrees, secret societies have always lurked, unseen architects of empires, puppeteers of revolutions, guardians of forbidden knowledge that could unravel the very fabric of power. Forget the conspiracy-laden tales, spun in dimly lit forums or fevered novels, the frantic scribblings of those who see shadows in every corner. This is not the fever dream of paranoid minds. This is the true history of the Freemasons and the Illuminati, the veiled brotherhoods that history itself has tried to bury, not out of fear, but out of a deeper, more profound dread. The terror of truths too potent to face in the light of day. Imagine, if you will, a world where kings fall not by the clash of swords, but by the subtle turn of a key in a hidden lock, where wars are waged not on battlefields, but in the quiet sanctuaries of lodges and enclaves, amid symbols etched in stone and ciphered in smoke. The Freemasons, those stonemasons of legend who rose from medieval guilds to become the unseen hand, shaping the Enlightenment's grand designs, and the Illuminati, born in the fires of Bavarian rationalism, a fleeting blaze that ignited fears still smouldering today. They are not mere clubs of the elite, nor figments of wild imagination. They are paradoxes incarnate, builders of cathedrals who shrouded their rites in secrecy, philosophers who preached light yet dwelled in darkness, revolutionaries who toppled thrones while cloaking their own in mystery. Their story is one of ascent and eclipse, of enlightenment shadowed by suspicion, of knowledge that liberates the mind even as it chains the soul to eternal vigilance. We begin not with the myths that have calcified around them, the all-seeing eyes on dollar bills, the supposed orchestration of world wars from subterranean lairs, but with the raw, unfiltered essence of what they were. Societies forged in the crucible of a Europe teetering between medieval superstition and the dawn of reason, where the Church's iron grip clashed with the stirrings of science, and monarchs trembled at the thought of enlightened masses. The Freemasons emerged from the dusty workshops of operative masons, those hardy artisans who hewn cathedrals from the earth's unyielding stone, their tools symbols of precision and brotherhood. By the 17th century, as guilds evolved into speculative orders, they transformed mortar and trowel into metaphors for moral architecture, inviting nobles, intellectuals, and even the occasional heretic into their fold. Yet secrecy was their shield, born not from malice, but necessity, in an age when inquisitors burned books and men alike for daring to question the divine order. And then the Illuminati, a name that evokes both awe and alarm, a society founded in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, a professor cloaked in the robes of academia, who sought to pierce the veil of religious dogma with the sharp blade of reason. They were the radical edge of the Enlightenment, a network of enlightened minds plotting not domination, but the dissolution of superstition's chains. Recruits were drawn from the salons of Bavaria, sworn to secrecy under penalties of exposure that could mean exile or worse. Their grades of initiation mimicked the Masonic structure, but with a fervor that burned brighter, more dangerously, levels of Minerval, Illuminatus Minor, ascending to the inner sanctum, where truths were unveiled like stars emerging from a storm-swept sky. Weishaupt envisioned a world remade, free from the tyrants of altar and throne, yet his society's brevity, suppressed by edict in 1785, only amplified its legend, seeding the fertile ground of conspiracy. But herein lies the paradox that binds them. These were not villains cackling in the night, nor saints haloed in virtue. The Freemasons, with their rituals echoing ancient Egyptian mysteries and Solomon's temple, promised fraternity and progress, yet their exclusivity bred envy and accusation. Jews, Jesuits, Jacobins, all shadows cast upon their doorsteps. The Illuminati, in their quest for pure intellect, infiltrated Masonic lodges like a virus of idealism, only to be branded as the root of every upheaval, from the French Revolution to the American founding. History, that great editor, has clipped their narratives, reducing vast tapestries to caricatures. The Freemason as the shadowy banker funding wars, the Illuminatus as the eternal orchestrator of chaos. Yet peel back the layers, and you find human frailty at the core, men grappling with the weight of forbidden wisdom, their oaths a bulwark against a world that feared what it could not control. This documentary will journey through the mists of their origins, unearthing the geopolitics of a fractured continent where religious wars bled into ideological ones, where the scent of gunpowder mingled with the incense of secret rites. We will delve into the early lives of their founders, the traumas of persecution that forged their resolve, the core events that propelled them from obscurity to infamy. The Masonic influx into the American colonies, the Illuminati's clandestine congresses amid the thunder of revolution. We will trace their philosophical evolution, from the operative craft of stone to the speculative forge of ideas, and the inevitable clash with powers that could not tolerate such veiled autonomy. And in their legacy, we will confront the modern echoes, the debates in shadowed archives, the films that mythologize them, the academic battles over whether they were saviors or saboteurs. As we embark on this odyssey, let the weight of secrecy settle upon you like a cloak in the midnight hour. These societies did not merely exist. They embodied the human hunger for meaning beyond the visible, a thirst that history has both quenched and poisoned. And that paradox endures, whispering through the ages. In seeking light, they embraced the dark. In building empires of thought, they toppled their own. Welcome to the true history of the Freemasons and the Illuminati, the mysteries that power dare not name. To understand the Freemasons and the Illuminati, we must first descend into the fractured heart of Europe, that vast, brooding continent where the echoes of medieval faith still clashed with the relentless march of reason. Picture it, the 16th and 17th centuries, a time when the air hung heavy with the acrid smoke of religious wars, where the continent bled from wounds inflicted not just by steel, but by the unyielding dogmas of church and crown. The Reformation had torn Christendom asunder, Luther's defiant theses nailed to Wittenberg's door in 1517, igniting a firestorm that spread like plague across the Holy Roman Empire, England, France, and beyond. Protestant princes rose against Catholic emperors, and in the 30 Years' War, from 1618 to 1648, the fields of Bohemia and the Rhineland became charnel houses, where armies of mercenaries ravaged villages, leaving behind a trail of famine, plague, and desolation that claimed perhaps 8 million souls. It was an era of apocalypse deferred, where the book of Revelation seemed not prophecy, but chronicle, and the divine right of kings rang hollow amid the screams of the dying. Geopolitics in this shadowland was a chessboard of shifting alliances, where Habsburg Spain and the Austrian Empire clung to the scepter of Catholic universality, their inquisitorial eyes scanning for heresy in every flickering candle. To the north, the Dutch Republic carved out a precarious independence from Spanish tyranny, their ports buzzing with merchants who traded not just spices and silks, but the dangerous currency of printed books, pamphlets that whispered of natural philosophy, of Copernicus's sun-centered cosmos that dared to dethrone the earth from God's ordained center. England, under the Tudors and early Stuarts, teetered between Anglican compromise and Puritan fervor, its civil wars looming like storm clouds by the mid-17th century, where Parliament's iron will would clash with Charles I's divine pretensions, culminating in regicide and the brief grim Republic of Cromwell. France, that grand colossus under Louis XIV, embodied absolutism's gilded cage. The Sun King's Versailles, a monument to centralized power, yet beneath its opulent halls, Huguenots, French Protestants, fled the revocation of Nantes in 1685, their exodus seeding Protestant enclaves across Europe and the New World. Empires expanded and contracted like breathing beasts. The Ottoman shadow loomed at Vienna's gates in 1683, a reminder that Christendom's fractures invited predators from without. Culture in this cauldron was a tapestry woven from threads of terror and tentative light. The Renaissance, that Italian rebirth of classical antiquity, had rippled northward, but it arrived tainted by the wars of religion. Michelangelo's David now seemed a defiant pagan idol in a world of crucifixes and auto-da-fés. Art and architecture spoke of transience. The soaring Gothic cathedrals of the late Middle Ages, like Chartres with its stained-glass sermons in azure and crimson, gave way to the restrained elegance of Baroque excess, where Bernini's sculptures writhed in ecstatic agony, mirroring the soul's torment under Counter-Reformation zeal. Literature, too, bore the scars. Shakespeare's tragedies, he penned in the shadow of the gunpowder plot and plague-ridden London, probed the fragility of ambition and loyalty, while Cervantes' Don Quixote tilted at windmills of illusion in a Spain gripped by imperial overreach and inquisitorial fear. Music drifted through the chapels and courts like incense, Palestrina's polyphony, a harmonious veil over doctrinal strife. Bach's later fugues, a mathematical order imposed on chaos yet to fully unfold. Yet beneath this cultural veneer pulsed a world-view in seismic shift, where the medieval cosmos, geocentric, hierarchical, divinely ordained, crumbled under the assault of empirical inquiry. The scientific revolution dawned not as a blaze, but a slow-burning ember. Galileo's telescope in 1609 piercing the heavens to reveal Jupiter's moons, defying Aristotelian perfection and earning him house arrest from the Inquisition in 1633. Descartes, the French philosopher-soldier, retreated into doubt's solitude, declaring cogito ergo sum in 1637, a foundation of certainty amid the ruins of scholasticism. Yet his mechanistic universe reduced God to a distant clockmaker, unsettling the faithful. Newton's Principia in 1687 would crown this era, his laws of motion and gravity unveiling a predictable machinery to the stars. But in the 17th century, such ideas circulated like contraband, debated in coffeehouses and academies where men like Robert Boyle experimented with air pumps, probing the invisible forces that bound the world. Alchemy lingered in the shadows, not as mere charlatanism, but as a bridge to chemistry. Paracelsus's toxic remedies challenging Galen's humours, hinting at a hidden order beneath the apparent randomness of disease and decay. This was the soil from which secret societies would sprout, a Europe where knowledge was power, and power was peril. The Church, vast and vigilant, claimed monopoly on truth through the Council of Trent's decrees from 1545 to 1563, reaffirming transubstantiation and papal supremacy while establishing seminaries to combat Protestant errors. Jesuits, that militant order founded by Ignatius Loyola in 1540, became the Church's shock troops, confessors to kings, missionaries to infidels. Their Ratio Studiorum, a blueprint for rigorous education laced with unwavering orthodoxy. Yet suspicion bred counter-suspicions. Rosicrucian manifestos, anonymous pamphlets from 1614 onward, promised a brotherhood of invisible adepts versed in Hermetic wisdom, Egyptian mysteries, and the elixir of immortality, stirring a frenzy of imitation and fear. Monarchs, too, wielded secrecy as a weapon. Richelieu's France forged cabals to undermine Habsburg hegemony, while England's Star Chamber dispensed justice in closed sessions, its whispers shaping policy without the glare of public scrutiny. In this labyrinth of loyalty and betrayal, The operative guilds of masons, those literal builders of stone who raised the abbeys and fortifications of a war-torn land, emerged as islands of stability. From the 14th century, their constitutions, like the Regius manuscript of around 1390, bound them in oaths of fidelity. Their lodges secret refuges where trade secrets were guarded against rivals and spies. Tools like the square and compass were not mere instruments, but emblems of rectitude and proportion, echoing the Pythagorean geometries that Renaissance humanists revived from Plato's Timaeus. As cathedrals waned in the face of Protestant iconoclasm, Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries in 1536, scattering monastic masons like leaves in the wind, these guilds adapted, their rituals absorbing elements of older mysteries. The widow's son from Hiram Abiff's biblical legend, slain for refusing to divulge Solomon's temple secrets, a parable of integrity amid persecution. And so, the stage was set, a continent adrift between faith's crumbling fortress and reason's uncertain dawn, where the thirst for hidden truths mirrored the era's own veiled fractures. Secrecy was not aberration, but survival, a bulwark against inquisitors' flames, kings' caprice, and the mob's unlettered rage. The Freemasons would rise from these operative roots, speculative tendrils reaching toward Enlightenment's promise. The Illuminati, later still, would ignite in the Enlightenment's rational blaze, fanned by winds of reform that carried the scent of gunpowder from America's distant shores. In this world of shadows and half-lights, their foundations were laid, not in malice, but in the profound human ache for order amid chaos. And that necessity, born of blood and belief, would change everything. To trace the origins of these shadowed brotherhoods, we must peer into the formative years of their architects, men shaped not by destiny's grand decree, but by the quiet cruelties of circumstance, the gnawing doubts of a world in flux, and the allure of secrets that promised both salvation and solitude. Forget the legends that paint them as heirs to ancient priesthoods, descendants of Solomon's wise men, or Egyptian hierophants whispering through the pyramid's dust. Such myths, embroidered over centuries, serve more to dazzle than to illuminate, veiling the raw human truths beneath. No, the Freemasons and Illuminati arose from documented fragments, guild charters yellowed with age, professorial ledgers, clandestine letters intercepted by wary eyes, revealing figures forged in the fires of personal trial, their psyches etched by the era's contradictions. A hunger for brotherhood amid isolation, a quest for light in an age of encroaching darkness. Begin with the Freemasons, whose roots burrow deep into the operative soil of medieval craft, yet whose speculative bloom owes much to the enigmatic lives of early influencers. Men like Elias Ashmole, the English antiquarian, whose initiation in 1646 marks a pivotal whisper in the transition from stone to symbol. Born in 1617 in Lichfield, amid the smouldering aftermath of England's civil strife, Ashmole entered a world where the scent of gunpowder from the bishops' wars still clung to the air, and families like his, modest gentry teetering on ruin, navigated the treacherous tides of allegiance. His father, a saddler, died young, leaving young Elias to the mercies of a stepfather whose iron discipline mirrored the Puritan rigor sweeping the land. Trauma here was subtle, insidious. The fragility of status in a society where royalists and parliamentarians tore at each other's throats, where the execution of Charles I in 1649 would cast long shadows over Ashmole's formative years. He apprenticed in law and medicine, his mind a sponge for the alchemical texts circulating in Oxford's hidden libraries, works by Dee and Flood that blended hermetic lore with empirical probe, promising mastery over nature's veiled mechanisms. Psychologically, Ashmole embodied the contradiction of his age. A royalist at heart, he collected curiosities, Egyptian mummies, astrological charts, Masonic relics. with a fervor that bordered on obsession, as if hoarding fragments of a shattered cosmos could restore order to his fractured world. Initiated into a Warrington Lodge at 28, not as a mere operative mason laying bricks, but as a speculative seeker drawn by the guild's aura of mystery, he found in Freemasonry a refuge from the chaos. The rites, drawn from operative traditions like the old charges, manuscripts such as the Cook manuscript of 1410 or the Harleian of 1723, spoke of Hiram Abiff, the widow's son, murdered for his silence, a myth that resonated with Ashmole's own sense of guarded integrity amid persecution. Cultural forces pulled him deeper. The Restoration of 1660, with Charles II's court a whirlwind of scientific curiosity, saw Ashmole co-founding the Royal Society in 1660, where Boyle's air pumps and Hooke's microscopes dissected the divine creation. Yet Freemasonry offered what science could not: an initiatory path, grades of enlightenment from entered apprentice to fellow craft, symbols like the rough ashlar smoothed by the working tools, metaphors for the soul's refinement. Ashmole's diaries, sparse and coded, reveal no grand trauma, but a profound loneliness. A man adrift in Enlightenment's dawn, seeking fraternity in lodges where oaths bound members against the inquisitorial gaze still lingering from Catholic plots like that of 1605. This speculative seed, planted in Ashmole's psyche, germinated across the Channel and into Scotland, where figures like Sir Robert Moray, initiated in Newcastle in 1641 during the Bishops' Wars, bridged military rigour with mystical inquiry. Moray, a Scottish noble captured by Covenanters, endured imprisonment's chill damp, emerging with a resolve hardened by betrayal. His kingly loyalties tested, his mind turning to the Rosicrucian echoes that promised invisible colleges of wisdom. These early Masons were not revolutionaries, but survivors, contradictions incarnate, blending Christian piety with pagan echoes, operative loyalty with intellectual ambition. By the late 17th century, as coffee houses in London buzzed with deists like Toland questioning Scripture's chains, the 1717 formation of the Grand Lodge in England crystallized this evolution. 4 lodges uniting under Anthony Sayers Gavel, their constitution penned by James Anderson in 1723, a blueprint of tolerance amid Hanoverian unease. Myths swirled even then. Claims of Templar descent from the 1307 Purge, or Druidic roots in Stonehenge's circles, but facts ground them in guild reality, persecuted artisans fleeing iconoclasm, their secrets a bulwark against economic ruin. Now turn to the Illuminati, whose origins pulse with a sharper, more cerebral intensity, centered on Adam Weishaupt, born in 1748 in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, a cradle of Catholic rigidity where the Jesuit's shadow loomed like a perpetual eclipse. Orphaned young by his father's death from tuberculosis, Weishaupt was raised by his godfather, Johann Adam von Ickstadt, a university administrator whose Enlightenment leanings clashed with the Society of Jesus's grip on education. Trauma etched Weishaupt early, the isolation of a prodigy, devouring Locke and Voltaire in hidden alcoves, while the air rang with Latin masses and inquisitorial warnings. At 12, he entered the Jesuit gymnasium, that forge of orthodoxy where Ratio Studiorum drilled dogma into young minds, yet cracks appeared. Ickstadt's influence smuggling in rationalist texts, fostering a psyche torn between faith's comfort and reason's cold blade. By 1768, at 20, Weishaupt earned his doctorate in canon law, his thesis on suicide, a veiled rebellion against the Church's monopoly on the soul, penned amid the 7 Years' War's lingering scars, where Bavaria's fields still bore the bones of Prussian incursions. Psychologically, Weishaupt was the era's paradox distilled, a man of profound contradictions, despising superstition, yet structuring his society with ritualistic grades, novice, Minerval, Illuminatus, echoing Masonic assent but laced with deistic fervor. cultural forces converged. The Enlightenment salons in Munich, where philosophes debated Rousseau's social contract, fueled his vision of a secular utopia. Traumatized by Jesuit control, expelled influences that stifled free thought, he founded the Illuminati on May 1, 1776, in Ingolstadt's university shadows, recruiting 5 students sworn to secrecy under pseudonyms like Spartacus for himself, a nod to the slave revolt's defiant spark. No ancient myths here but documented intent, letters outlining a war on obscurantism, the church and state as twin tyrants chaining humanity. Yet irony shadowed him. Weishaupt, the rationalist, delved into Egyptian symbolism, his orders Minerval owl echoing Minerva's wisdom, a cultural borrow from Freemasonry's speculative allure. Personal fragility marked him. Hypochondria plagued his later years. A fear of exposure mirroring the society's own precarious bloom amid Bavarian edicts. These origins, then, Ashmole's alchemical solitude, Weishaupt's orphaned intellect, reveal not demigods, but men scarred by loss, propelled by the cultural schism between altar and academy. Myths may claim eternal lineages, but facts unearth human frailty. The Freemasons rising from guild oaths to speculative dreams, the Illuminati igniting from professorial dissent. In their early lives, the seeds of secrecy took root, nourished by traumas that whispered of hidden orders amid visible chaos. And from those shadowed beginnings, their rise would unfold inexorably, altering the course of empires unseen. From the shadowed nurseries of guild halls and university cloisters, the Freemasons and Illuminati did not merely persist. They surged, their tendrils weaving through the veins of a world convulsing in revolution and rebirth, transforming whispers into thunder that reshaped nations from the inside out. Picture the late 17th and 18th centuries, that precarious bridge between absolutism's creaking edifice and the Enlightenment's unyielding forge, where the air thickened with the salt of ocean voyages and the ink of manifestos, and secrecy became not just a shield, but a scalpel carving new orders from the old. The Freemasons, once confined to the damp stone of English lodges, spilled across the Atlantic like ink from a quill, infiltrating the raw, untamed colonies where liberty's seed germinated in tobacco fields and Puritan sermons. And the Illuminati, that Bavarian spark struck in 1776, flickered into a network of clandestine conclaves, their debates echoing the crack of muskets from Lexington to Yorktown, binding intellect to insurrection in ways that history would later strain to disentangle. This was their ascent, not a triumphant parade, but a slow, inexorable infiltration, marked by oaths sworn in candle-lit rooms, alliances forged in the hush of midnight, and betrayals that cast long, jagged shadows over the birth of modern states. Begin with the Freemasons' transatlantic exodus, a migration born of necessity and ambition, as operative remnants and speculative visionaries fled the old world's religious strife for the new world's promise of untrammeled ground. By the 1730s, as the Grand Lodge of England dispatched warrants like papal bulls across the seas, lodges sprouted in Boston's fog-shrouded wharves and Philadelphia's bustling squares. St. John's Lodge in 1733, the first on American soil, a sanctuary where merchants and artisans gathered under the watchful eye of colonial governors who saw in masonry a bulwark of British loyalty, yet unwittingly sowed the seeds of rebellion. Forensic traces remain in the minutes of these early assemblies. Paul Revere, the silversmith whose midnight ride would ignite the revolution, initiated in 1760 into a Boston lodge, where the square and compass symbolized not just moral geometry, but the precise mechanics of resistance. His psyche, scarred by the French and Indian War's frontier horrors, scalped settlers and ambushed patrols, found in Freemasonry a fraternity that transcended tribal feuds. Its rituals a psychological anchor amid the colony's fractious patchwork of Anglican elites and dissenting radicals. The core events unfolded with dramatic inevitability, each duel of ideals escalating like a storm gathering over the harbors. Consider the 1750s influx into Virginia, where George Washington, that stoic surveyor of untamed lands, joined Fredericksburg Lodge No. 4 in 1752 at age 20, his initiation a rite amid the Shenandoah's wild echoes, where the widow's son legend mirrored his own orphaned youth under Lawrence's stern tutelage. Washington's rise was no accident of fate, but a calculated ascent through Masonic networks. By 1775, as the Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia's humid halls, over half its delegates were Masons, Franklin, Hancock, the Adams cousins, their lodges serving as covert conduits for intelligence, smuggling resolutions past British censors like contraband rum. The intensity peaked in the Revolution's forge. The 1776 Declaration, penned in Franklin's sunlit study yet whispered in lodge backrooms, bore the imprint of Masonic deism, its appeal to nature's God and unalienable rights, echoing the speculative craft's emphasis on universal brotherhood over monarchical divine right. Sensory details linger in the archives. The creak of wooden floors in Williamsburg taverns, where Masons plotted under the guise of toasts, the acrid tang of pipe smoke mingling with the fervor of debates on Montesquieu's separation of powers, absorbed from lodge lectures on Solomon's balanced temple. Yet paradox shadowed this rise. Freemasonry, promoter of order, fueled chaos. In 1769, the Antients and Moderns schism fractured English Masonry, spilling into America as rival Grand Lodges vied for colonial souls. Their rivalry, a microcosm of imperial fissures. Washington himself bridged the divide, chartering Alexandria Lodge in 1783 amid the war's dying embers, laying the cornerstone of the Capitol in 1793 with Masonic trowel in hand, a ritual that consecrated the new republic in symbols of ancient craft. Brutality underscored the grandeur. Loyalist Masons like Beverly Robinson faced exile or noose for their oaths to king and craft alike. Their betrayals, Arnold's treason in 1780, whispered to have Masonic ties, exposing the fragility of fraternal bonds when empire cracked. By war's end over 9, Iurazard American Masons had fought, their lodges evolving from social refugees to revolutionary nerve centers. The all-seeing eye on the Great Seal of 1782, a nod to divine providence laced with esoteric vigilance. Parallel to this colonial blaze, the Illuminati's core ignited in Europe's powder keg, their clandestine congresses a forensic mosaic of intercepted couriers and seized pashas, revealing a network that pulsed from Ingolstadt to the salons of Paris. Weishaupt's order expanded rapidly post-1776, recruiting luminaries like Adolf Nigg, the diplomat whose 1780 initiation brought organizational genius, structuring the grades into a pyramid of secrecy, the outer circle of Minervals, owl-eyed novices gathering in moonlit gardens to recite deistic catechisms, ascending to the Areopagites, the inner council plotting in ciphered missives. The drama intensified in the 1780s congresses, Wilhelmsbad in 1782, a Hessian castle shrouded in July mists, where Illuminati infiltrated Masonic assemblies, poaching members with promises of rational purity over ritualistic pomp. Here, amid the clink of goblets and rustle of forbidden texts, they debated the infiltration of Jesuits and Rosicrucians. Weishaupt's Spartacus persona, unveiling plans to seed Illuminati adepts into courts and universities, a slow corrosion of absolutism from within. The forensic intensity of their operations borders on the operatic. In 1784, the Congress of Frankfurt, held in a rented villa overlooking the main river, saw 600 delegates, many unwitting Masons, grapple with the order's radical core. Nigger advocating a blend of Egyptian mysteries and Voltairean wit to lure the elite. Sensory echoes persist, the flicker of tallow candles on yellowed maps of Europe, the murmur of pseudonyms exchanged like talismans, the chill draught carrying whispers of the French Revolution's brewing storm. Yet downfall loomed with ironic swiftness, betrayals from within. As disgruntled recruits like Franz Xavier von Zwack leaked documents in 1785, Bavarian edicts under Elector Karl Theodor branding the order a pernicious sect, raids on Weishaupt's home unearthing codebooks and radical tracts. Exiled to Gotha, Weishaupt penned apologies from hiding, but the damage cascaded. Ties to the 1789 Bastille fall fueled accusations. The Illuminati's brief blaze scapegoated for the guillotine's red harvest, their members scattering like embers into Masonic folds across the Atlantic. In this rise, the society's intertwined fates with history's brutality. Freemasons crowning republics in cornerstone ceremonies, Illuminati fanning intellectual fires that consumed thrones, yet human fragility prevailed, oaths fracturing under suspicion's weight, ambitions eclipsed by fear. Their core events were not mere episodes, but pivots where secrecy birthed nations, only to invite the very shadows they sought to dispel. And in that inexorable surge, the world tilted, forever altered by hands veiled in brotherhood's glove. As the revolutionary tempests subsided and the lodges emptied of war-weary initiates, the Freemasons and Illuminati did not fade into archival dust. They turned inward, their essences distilling through the alchemical fires of philosophy, evolving from crude instruments of survival into intricate tapestries of the soul's hidden architecture. This was no abrupt metamorphosis, no thunderclap of revelation, but a gradual unveiling, layer by shadowed layer, where the operative hammer's blunt force yielded to the speculative compass's precise arc, and the Illuminati's rational blade dulled into contemplative steel. In the hush of post-revolutionary drawing rooms, amid the crackle of hearth fires and the rustle of leather-bound tomes, these societies confronted their own paradoxes, builders who questioned foundations, enlighteners who embraced enigma, seekers of universal truth who bound themselves in veils of ritual. Their inner evolution was a journey from the external clamor of empires to the internal forge of ideas, where violence's echoes softened into wisdom's murmur, yet the melancholy of unfulfilled promise lingered like mist over forgotten altars. For the Freemasons, this philosophical pivot crystallized in the 18th century's speculative dawn, as the Grand Lodge's 1723 Constitution, James Anderson's meticulous charter inked in Edinburgh's dim scriptorium, transformed guild oaths into a moral cosmology, the rough ashlar of the unrefined self, smoothed by degrees of initiation that mirrored the soul's ascent through Plato's cave. No longer mere craftsmen hewing stone against the gales of iconoclasm, they became architects of virtue, their lodges sanctuaries where the tools of trade, gauge, level, plumb, became emblems of equity and discernment, drawn from the Euclidean geometries revived in Renaissance shadows. Sensory immersion defined these rites, the blindfolded candidate, hoodwinked in velvet darkness, stumbling across checkered floors that symbolized life's dualities, black and white, vice and virtue, the cable toe binding wrist like fate's inexorable thread, until the inner light of the worshipful master's gavel pierced the veil, unveiling the square's unyielding truth. Psychologically, this evolution grappled with the era's fractures. The deistic optimism of Voltaire, smuggled into lodge lectures, clashed with lingering Christian orthodoxy, birthing a tolerant syncretism that absorbed Kabbalistic whispers from Jewish exiles and hermetic echoes from Flamel's alchemical dreams, yet ironed out their sharper edges into palatable metaphors. The core of Masonic philosophy lay in its operative to speculative alchemy, a turn from physical labor's sweat-soaked toil to intellectual labor's contemplative glow, as seen in the writings of men like William Preston, whose 1772 illustrations of Masonry, penned in London's fog-choked garrets, elevated Hiram Abiff's legend from tragic artisan to archetype of integrity, slain not by rivals' blades, but by the soul's own temptations. Preston's lectures, delivered in candlelit halls where the air hung heavy with beeswax and pipe tobacco, dissected the liberal arts and sciences, grammar's eloquence, rhetoric's persuasion, geometry's divine proportion, as pillars supporting Solomon's temple, now rebuilt within the initiate's breast. This inner evolution bred contradictions. Freemasonry preached fraternity across creeds, yet its exclusivity, barring women, atheists, the uninitiated, mirrored the very hierarchies it sought to transcend, a irony that haunted figures like Benjamin Franklin, whose 1734 Pennsylvania Gazette advertised lodge meetings as beacons of reason, even as his deistic experiments with electricity in Philadelphia's static-charged workshops revealed a universe mechanistic and godless, at odds with the craft's theistic veil. Trauma from the Revolution lingered here too. Washington's 1797 letter to the Grand Lodge of Virginia, scrawled in Mount Vernon's lamplit study, invoked Masonry as a balm for partisan wounds, its philosophy a bridge from battlefield brutality to civic harmony. Yet the Society's silence on slavery's chains, many Southern Masons, complicit in its infernal economy, exposed the fragility of moral geometry when bent by human frailty. Parallel yet divergent, the Illuminati's philosophical core burned with a fiercer, more cerebral intensity, Weishaupt's rationalism evolving from defiant spark to a contemplative blaze that sought not just to dismantle thrones, but to reconstruct the mind's empire from superstition's rubble. Founded in the Enlightenment's rationalist crucible, their statutes, ciphered in the 1770s amid Ingolstadt's cloistered quads, where the scent of vellum and vinegar mingled, outlined a graded path to perfection, the novice's probation, a year of moral scrutiny under a mentor's watchful eye, ascending to the Illuminatus Major's unveiling of natural religion, stripped of clerical garb. This was evolution as excision. Weishaupt, exiled in 1785 to the Thuringian woods, refined his apology pro sua vita in hidden pamphlets, defending the order not as conspiracy, but as philosophy's vanguard, drawing from Locke's tabula rasa to argue that education, not divine fiat, forged virtue. The Minerval's owl, a symbol of wisdom piercing night's illusions. Sensory rites amplified this turn. Initiates gathered in moon-dappled groves or rented attics, reciting oaths over symbolic pyramids etched in sand, the air alive with the hush of turned pages. Rousseau's Emile, Bayle's dictionary, debating how to inoculate youth against priestcraft's poison. Their pseudonyms a psychological armor against the self's baser impulses, yet irony coiled through this inner forge. The Illuminati, champions of transparency, shrouded their truths in Masonic mimicry. Nigger's 1781 reforms layering Egyptian mysteries onto deistic scaffolds, a borrow that betrayed Weishaupt's purest disdain for ritual's puppetry. Post-suppression. Survivors like Christian Ingolstadt scattered into European salons, their philosophy infiltrating the 1790s German Jacobins, evolving into a melancholy revelation. Reason's light, unfiltered, exposed humanity's shadows, the guillotine's blade a grim mirror to absolutism's fall. Weishaupt's later years, spent in Regensburg's scholarly exile, yielded the 1790 Über die Schrecken des Todes, a meditation on mortality that softened radical edges into stoic acceptance, the order's brevity forcing a posthumous evolution. From active infiltration to spectral influence, seeding Hegel's dialectics and the 19th century positivism that would both honor and eclipse them. Human fragility underscored it all. Weishaupt's hypochondriac fears, documented in seized letters, revealing a philosopher haunted by the very obscurity he fought, his quest for enlightenment chaining him to perpetual vigilance. In this philosophical turn, the societies transcended their origins, from secrecy's defensive shell to wisdom's probing lens. Yet the melancholy persisted. Freemasons building moral temples amid crumbling social ones. Illuminati illuminating minds, only to watch shadows reclaim the light. Their inner evolution was no triumph, but a poignant negotiation with the eternal, power yielding to insight, mystery to revelation, in a world that demanded both. And in that delicate balance, the soul's true architecture emerged, fragile and profound. As the philosophical embers glowed within the veiled chambers of lodges and salons, casting long shadows across the Enlightenment's broadening stage, the Freemasons and Illuminati did not retreat into contemplative isolation. They erupted into the world's fray, their networks expanding like roots cracking ancient stone, infiltrating the gears of power with a precision that blurred the line between fraternity and subversion. This was the era of their true rise, from the 1730s through the revolutionary maelstrom of the 1790s, a period where the scent of printer's ink mingled with the metallic tang of bloodied cobblestones, and oaths sworn in dim-lit rooms echoed in the halls of nascent republics and toppled monarchies. No longer confined to the speculative musings of scholars or the operative toil of craftsmen, these societies became the unseen currents beneath history's surface, propelling events with a dramatic inevitability that forensic scrutiny reveals not as conspiracy, but as the inexorable logic of secrecy meeting opportunity. The Freemasons, with their transatlantic lodges multiplying like stars in a clearing sky, wove themselves into the fabric of American independence, their symbols etched into founding documents and cornerstones alike. The Illuminati, that fleeting comet of rational fervor, burrowed into Europe's intellectual underbelly, their clandestine maneuvers fanning the flames of upheaval until the very powers they sought to enlighten turned with predatory swiftness. Core events unfolded here like chapters in a shadowed chronicle, each alliance a pivot, each betrayal a fracture, exposing the human cost of veiled ambition in an age where Enlightenment's promise clashed with the brutality of entrenched thrones. Trace first the Freemasons' inexorable surge across the Atlantic, a migration that transformed guild refugees into revolutionary crucibles, beginning in the humid ports of the 1730s, where British warrants arrived like contraband scrolls, seeding lodges amid the colony's restless ferment. By 1730, the Grand Lodge of Ireland had chartered Solomon's Lodge in Ballybunion, but it was England's provincial Grand Master, the Duke of Norfolk, who dispatched deputies to Pennsylvania's Quaker soil, where Benjamin Franklin, printer, inventor, polymath, joined St. John's Lodge in Philadelphia in 1731, his initiation a sensory rite in a backroom, thick with the aroma of melting type metal and beeswax tapers. Franklin's psyche, honed by the streets of Boston's apprenticed hardships and the sting of religious intolerance that drove him westward, found in Masonry a universal solvent for colonial divides. Its lectures on geometry and ethics, drawn from Anderson's Constitution, resonated with his experiments in lightning rods and libraries, symbols of a rational order defying clerical thunder. The rise accelerated with demographic inevitability. By 1750, over 100 lodges dotted the eastern seaboard, from New York's raucous taverns to Charleston's genteel assemblies, drawing merchants whose ships carried not just tea and tobacco, but encrypted missives coordinating resistance to the Stamp Act's fiscal noose. The forensic drama of their core involvement in the American Revolution builds layer by layer, a slow crescendo of shadowed gatherings that history's archives, lodge minutes, intercepted letters, cornerstone ledgers, dissect with chilling clarity. In 1765, as Parliament's taxes ignited boycotts from Boston to Savannah, Masonic networks served as conduits for unity. The Sons of Liberty, that radical cadre, included Masons like James Otis and Samuel Adams, their meetings in Faneuil Hall's echoing chambers, blending anti-monarchical rhetoric with the craft's emphasis on liberty as a moral square. Sensory echoes persist in the records, the creak of oaken doors at the Green Dragon Tavern in Boston, a Masonic haunt where Paul Revere, initiated in 1760, plotted the 1775 midnight ride. His horses' hooves on snow-dusted roads, carrying warnings forged in lodge debates on natural rights. Washington's Fredericksburg initiation in 1752 evolved into command. As Commander-in-Chief in 1775, he convened Masonic rites at Valley Forge in 1778. Amid the winter's bone-chilling frost and soldiers' ragged coughs, laying a symbolic cornerstone for morale, the plumb line a metaphor for the Republic's upright path. Over 13 generals on both sides were Masons. Lafayette, crossing from France's revolutionary shores in 1777, joined Washington's Cambridge Lodge, his youthful idealism binding Franco-American bonds in rituals that whispered of shared enlightenment. Paradox laced this ascent: Freemasonry, architect of order, midwifed chaos. The 1776 Continental Congress in Philadelphia's sweltering State House saw Franklin and Hancock, Lodge brothers, affix signatures to the Declaration, its deistic phrasing, endowed by their creator, a veiled nod to the craft's great architect. Yet the document's radical severance from kingly chains exposed the society's dual soul, tolerant yet insurgent. Brutality shadowed the grandeur. Benedict Arnold's 1780 treason at West Point, where Masonic oaths to Britain clashed with revolutionary fervor, led to his flight amid cannon smoke and loyalist laments, a fracture that tested fraternal vows. By 1789, as the Constitution emerged from secret conventions in steamy Philadelphia summers, Masonic influence peaked, Washington presiding over the 1793 Capitol cornerstone with apron and trowel, the mallet strike resounding like fate's gavel, consecrating a nation built on speculative ideals. Yet human fragility intruded, enslaved Masons like Prince Hall, founding his African Lodge in 1784 amid Boston's racial barricades, petitioned for equality in vain, their pleas echoing unanswered in white-dominated halls, a melancholy irony in a philosophy of brotherhood. Across the ocean, the Illuminati's rise burned with sharper, more perilous intensity, their core events a forensic tapestry of seized couriers and edicts that reveal a network swelling from 5 initiates to perhaps 2, Zeus-Zeron by 1784, infiltrating Masonic lodges like a philosophical virus amid Bavaria's Catholic frost. Weishaupt's 1776 founding in Ingolstadt's shadowed university expanded through Nigger's genius, the 1780 recruitment of this Hessian noble, in a moonlit Eisenach garden where the air hummed with summer crickets and the rustle of forbidden pamphlets structured the order into continental cells. Vienna's salons, Paris's academies, using pseudonyms and couriers on horseback to evade Jesuit spies. The drama escalated in the 1782 Wilhelmsbad Congress, a Hessian chateau veiled in July haze, where 35 Illuminati, posing as Masons, swayed 600 delegates toward deistic reforms, debating in ciphered whispers the dissolution of monastic orders and the education of princes in rational virtue. Sensory fragments endure. The clatter of silver on porcelain during masked banquets, the flicker of lanterns on maps plotting infiltration of the Habsburg court, Nigger's reforms layering Minerval grades with Egyptian obelisks symbolizing ascent from superstition's pyramid base. The forensic peak arrived in the 1780s clandestine operations, a slow-burning intrigue that history unravels through the 1785 Bavarian raids, agents storming Zwack's Munich residence, unearthing 200 letters in code, detailing plans to place adepts in electoral councils, their rationalist catechisms a blade against altar and throne. Betrayal struck like lightning. Edward Marcus Constantine, a disaffected priest, defected in 1784, his confessions fueling Elector Karl Theodor's July 1784 ban, edicts branding the order a diabolical sect, amid fears of Jacobin echoes from America's distant victory. Weishaupt fled through Thuringian forests, his exile a poignant fall from professorial heights, yet the society's dissolution only amplified its shadow. Survivors like Bode carried doctrines to the 1789 Frankfurt Illuminati remnants, where whispers linked them to the Bastille's storming. Mirabeau, a rumoured initiate, rising in the National Assembly as guillotines fell in Parisian squares, reeking of cordite and fear. Irony coiled tight. The Illuminati, seekers of light, ignited darkness, accused of orchestrating the reign of terror, their brevity scapegoating them for Robespierre's purges, even as Weishaupt's writings, smuggled to Swiss presses, seeded 19th-century liberalism. In this rise, the society's core events forged modern contours. Freemasons crowning republics in ritual stone, Illuminati eroding empires with intellectual acid. Yet the melancholy endured, oaths binding men in brotherhood, only to snap under suspicion's lash, ambitions unveiling not utopia, but the fragility of human designs. Their surge was no mere ascent, but a profound negotiation with power's abyss, where secrecy's glove concealed trembling hands. And in that veiled thrust, history's architecture shifted, foundations cracked by the very tools meant to build. As the revolutionary tempests subsided and the lodges emptied of war-weary initiates, the Freemasons and Illuminati did not fade into archival dust. They turned inward, their essences distilling through the alchemical fires of philosophy, evolving from crude instruments of survival into intricate tapestries of the soul's hidden architecture. This was no abrupt metamorphosis, no thunderclap of revelation, but a gradual unveiling, layer by shadowed layer, where the operative hammer's blunt force yielded to the speculative compass's precise arc, and the Illuminati's rational blade dulled into contemplative steel. In the hush of post-revolutionary drawing rooms, amid the crackle of hearth fires and the rustle of leather-bound tomes, these societies confronted their own paradoxes. Builders who questioned foundations, enlighteners who embraced enigma, seekers of universal truth who bound themselves in veils of ritual. Their inner evolution was a journey from the external clamor of empires to the internal forge of ideas, where violence's echoes softened into wisdom's murmur. Yet the melancholy of unfulfilled promise lingered like mist over forgotten altars. For the Freemasons, this philosophical pivot crystallized in the 18th century's speculative dawn as the Grand Lodge's 1723 Constitution, James Anderson's meticulous charter, inked in Edinburgh's dim scriptorium, transformed guild oaths into a moral cosmology. The rough ashlar of the unrefined self, smoothed by degrees of initiation that mirrored the soul's ascent through Plato's cave. No longer mere craftsmen hewing stone against the gales of iconoclasm, they became architects of virtue, their lodges sanctuaries, where the tools of trade, gauge, level, plumb, became emblems of equity and discernment, drawn from the Euclidean geometries, revived in Renaissance shadows. Sensory immersion defined these rites. The blindfolded candidate, hoodwinked in velvet darkness, stumbling across checkered floors that symbolized life's dualities, black and white, vice and virtue, the cable-toe binding wrist like fate's inexorable thread, until the inner light of the worshipful master's gavel pierced the veil, unveiling the square's unyielding truth. Psychologically, this evolution grappled with the era's fractures. The deistic optimism of Voltaire, smuggled into lodge lectures, clashed with lingering Christian orthodoxy, birthing a tolerant syncretism that absorbed Kabbalistic whispers from Jewish exiles and hermetic echoes from Flamel's alchemical dreams, yet ironed out their sharper edges into palatable metaphors. The core of Masonic philosophy lay in its operative to speculative alchemy, a turn from physical labor's sweat-soaked toil to intellectual labor's contemplative glow, as seen in the writings of men like William Preston, whose 1772 illustrations of Masonry, penned in London's fog-choked garrets, elevated Hiram Abiff's legend from tragic artisan to archetype of integrity, slain not by rivals' blades, but by the soul's own temptations. Preston's lectures, delivered in candlelit halls where the air hung heavy with beeswax and pipe tobacco, dissected the liberal arts and sciences, grammar's eloquence, rhetoric's persuasion, geometry's divine proportion, as pillars supporting Solomon's temple, now rebuilt within the initiate's breast. This inner evolution bred contradictions. Freemasonry preached fraternity across creeds, yet its exclusivity, barring women, atheists, the uninitiated, mirrored the very hierarchies it sought to transcend, an irony that haunted figures like Benjamin Franklin, whose 1734 Pennsylvania Gazette advertised lodge meetings as beacons of reason, even as his deistic experiments with electricity in Philadelphia's static-charged workshops revealed a universe mechanistic and godless, at odds with the craft's theistic veil. Trauma from the Revolution lingered here too. Washington's 1797 letter to the Grand Lodge of Virginia, scrawled in Mount Vernon's lamplit study, invoked Masonry as a balm for partisan wounds, its philosophy a bridge from battlefield brutality to civic harmony. Yet the Society's silence on slavery's chains, many Southern Masons complicit in its infernal economy, exposed the fragility of moral geometry when bent by human frailty. Parallel yet divergent, the Illuminati's philosophical core burned with a fiercer, more cerebral intensity, Weishaupt's rationalism evolving from defiant spark to a contemplative blaze that sought not just to dismantle thrones, but to reconstruct the mind's empire from superstition's rubble. Founded in the Enlightenment's rationalist crucible, their statutes, ciphered in the 1770s amid Ingolstadt's cloistered quads, where the scent of vellum and vinegar mingled, outlined a graded path to perfection. The novice's probation, a year of moral scrutiny under a mentor's watchful eye, ascending to the Illuminatus Major's unveiling of natural religion stripped of clerical garb. This was evolution as excision. Weishaupt, exiled in 1785 to the Thuringian woods, refined his apology pro sua vita in hidden pamphlets, defending the order not as conspiracy, but as philosophy's vanguard, drawing from Locke's tabula rasa, to argue that education, not divine fiat, forged virtue, the Minerval's owl a symbol of wisdom, piercing night's illusions. Sensory rites amplified this turn. Initiates gathered in moon-dappled groves or rented attics, reciting oaths over symbolic pyramids etched in sand, the air alive with the hush of turned pages. Rousseau's Emile, Bayle's dictionary, debating how to inoculate youth against priestcraft's poison, their pseudonyms a psychological armor against the self's baser impulses. Yet irony coiled through this inner forge. The Illuminati, champions of transparency, shrouded their truths in Masonic mimicry. Nigge's 1781 reforms, layering Egyptian mysteries onto deistic scaffolds. A borrow that betrayed Weishaupt's purist disdain for ritual's puppetry. Post-suppression, survivors like Christian Ingolstadt scattered into European salons, their philosophy infiltrating the 1790s German Jacobins, evolving into a melancholy revelation. Reason's light, unfiltered, exposed humanity's shadows, the guillotine's blade a grim mirror to absolutism's fall. Weishaupt's later years, spent in Regensburg's scholarly exile, yielded the 1790 Über die Schrecken des Todes, a meditation on mortality that softened radical edges into stoic acceptance, the order's brevity forcing a posthumous evolution. From active infiltration to spectral influence, seeding Hegel's dialectics and the 19th century positivism that would both honor and eclipse them. Human fragility underscored it all. Weishaupt's hypochondriac fears, documented in seized letters, revealing a philosopher haunted by the very obscurity he fought, his quest for enlightenment chaining him to perpetual vigilance. In this philosophical turn, the societies transcended their origins, from secrecy's defensive shell to wisdom's probing lens, yet the melancholy persisted. Freemasons building moral temples amid crumbling social ones, Illuminati illuminating minds only to watch shadows reclaim the light. Their inner evolution was no triumph, but a poignant negotiation with the eternal, power yielding to insight, mystery to revelation, in a world that demanded both. And in that delicate balance, the soul's true architecture emerged, fragile and profound. As the philosophical veils lifted within those candlelit sanctuaries, revealing not unassailable truths but the flickering illusions of the human mind, the Freemasons and Illuminati did not dissolve into the ether of forgotten lore. Their essences seeped outward, infiltrating the cultural bloodstream of modernity like ink bleeding through parchment, staining books, screens, and collective imaginations with a persistent, enigmatic hue. This was no serene diffusion, no gentle handover from shadowed initiates to enlightened posterity, but a turbulent legacy, forged in the 19th century's industrial clamor and amplified through the 20th's mechanical roar, where the society's symbols, compass and square, owl and pyramid, became talismans for both reverence and revulsion. In the hush of libraries and the glare of celluloid projectors, their story evolved from historical footnote to mythic archetype, dissected by scholars in dusty tomes, dramatized in flickering reels, and debated in the fevered forums of popular culture. Yet herein lies the profound irony. What began as bastions of rational fraternity morphed into emblems of eternal conspiracy, their grandeur eclipsed by misconceptions that cast long, accusatory shadows, reminding us of history's fragility, how truths, once guarded, twist into specters under the weight of collective fear. Books, those silent sentinels of the intellect, first captured the society's lingering aura in the 19th century, as Enlightenment embers reignited in romantic flames, transforming factual chronicles into speculative tapestries that blurred the line between archive and allegory. William Preston's Illustrations of Masonry, that 1772 cornerstone of speculative philosophy, proliferated through editions hawked in London's fog-veiled bookstalls, its pages yellowed and dog-eared, dissecting Hiram Abiff's tragedy as a parable of moral fortitude, influencing initiates from Edinburgh's granite-hewn halls to Boston's revolutionary parlors. By the 1800s, as Napoleon's fall unleashed a torrent of anti-Masonic fervor, Augustin Baruel's 1797 memoirs illustrating the history of Jacobinism, penned in the exile's dim Parisian garret amid the guillotine's fading echoes, branded the Illuminati as the hidden puppeteers of the revolution, their rationalist doctrines twisted into a diabolical blueprint for chaos, a narrative that echoed through John Robinson's 1798 Proofs of a Conspiracy, its Scottish author's ink laced with Protestant dread, warning of Jesuit infiltrations and Bavarian shadows encroaching on Britain's sceptred isle. Sensory fragments endure in these volumes, the musty scent of calfskin bindings, the crackle of pages turned by gaslight as readers, nervous clerks and wide-eyed aristocrats traced ciphered diagrams, their minds ensnared by the paradox of enlightenment as enslavement. Academic reinterpretations deepened this literary legacy in the 20th century, Forensic scholars wielding scalpels of evidence to excise myth from marrow, yet often unearthing bones that only fueled further debate. Margaret Jacobs' 1991 Living the Enlightenment, composed in the quiet archives of UCLA's sun-baked libraries, reframed Freemasonry as a vital artery of the scientific revolution, its lodges incubators for Newton's calculus and Voltaire's wit. Drawing from Dutch Golden Age records, where Masons debated optics amid the canal's lapping waters, their rituals a psychological scaffold for empirical faith amid religious schisms. Contrast this with the darker lens of Daniel Pipes's 1997 Conspiracy, a polemic etched in the stark fluorescence of think tank offices, which dissects Illuminati law as a psychological balm for modernity's discontents, unemployed intellectuals projecting order onto chaos, their theories a fragile bulwark against the assembly line's relentless grind. Debates rage in these reinterpretations. Was Freemasonry a progressive force, as Frances Yates argued in her 1972 The Rosicrucian Enlightenment, linking it to Hermetic revivals in Elizabeth I's court, where alchemical labs bubbled with elixirs promising not gold, but societal transmutation? Or a conservative relic, as Stephen Bullock's 1996 Revolutionary Brotherhood posits, its American lodges enforcing elite hierarchies even as they preached equality, the irony stark in Prince Hall's marginalized African rites, conducted in Boston's shadowed basements amid the clatter of chains from nearby auctions. Films and pop culture amplified this legacy into visceral spectacle, the silver screen's glow casting the societies as both heroes and villains in a cinematic morality play that preyed on the viewer's primal unease with the unseen. Dan Brown's 2003 The Da Vinci Code, adapted to the screen in 2006 amid Hollywood's buzzing lots, wove Freemasonic symbols, the inverted pentagram, the lost word, into a thriller's pulse-pounding chase through the Louvre's echoing galleries, Tom Hanks's professorial furrowed brow embodying the intellectual thrill of decoding history's veils, yet reducing millennia of craft to a sensationalist cipher for Grail myths. Earlier, the 1935 Fox films The Man Who Knew Too Much, scripted in the shadow of the Great Depression's breadlines, hinted at Illuminati cabals orchestrating global intrigue, its suspenseful scores swelling like a lodge's solemn dirge, while Umberto Eco's 1980 Foucault's Pendulum, later dramatized in literary adaptations, satirized conspiracy theorists in Milanese print shops reeking of fresh newsprint. Their fevered reconstructions of Templar Freemason plots a melancholy mirror to Weishaupt's own rationalist hubris. Pop culture's embrace bred misconceptions like rampant ivy, the all-seeing eye on the US dollar, a 1782 Masonic emblem of providence twisted in 1980s music videos, from Madonna's veiled pyramid stages to Jay-Z's diamond hand signs, into proof of elite domination. Fueling podcasts and YouTube rants, where gravel-voiced hosts, lit by computer screens in suburban basements, link the societies to everything from moon landings to market crashes, their psychological framing a desperate grasp for patterns in postmodern flux. Yet these modern echoes carry a profound melancholy, the grandeur of original intent, fraternity's quiet forge, reason's defiant spark, drowned in the brutality of misinterpretation, where academic rigor clashes with populist paranoia in endless unresolved debates. Scholars like John Dickey in his 2020 The Dream of the Celt debate Freemasonry's role in Italian unification, its Carbonari offshoots fueling Risorgimento fires amid Garibaldi's sulphurous battlefields, while skeptics like Christopher Hodap in Freemasons for Dummies dismantle Illuminati survival myths, tracing their revival to 1960s counterculture hoaxes in California's hazy communes. Misconceptions persist, ironical thorns, the societies as Jewish cabals, a libel born of 19th-century pogroms or satanic cults, as in the 1980s, satanic panics courtroom hysterias, where daycare raids echoed inquisitorial raids, exposing human fragility's dark underbelly, fear's alchemy turning builders into bogeymen. In films like National Treasure's 2004 vault raiding romp, Nicolas Cage deciphers Masonic clues beneath Philadelphia's humid vaults, a populist fantasy that honors the craft's puzzle-solving legacy, yet trivializes its philosophical depth, leaving viewers with the paradox of allure, drawn to the mystery, repelled by its shadows. This legacy, then, is no unblemished monument, but a fractured edifice, books whispering forgotten oaths, films flickering with imagined threats, pop culture's debates a cacophony over truths long buried. The Freemasons endure in grand lodges, from London's echoing halls to New York's skyscraping temples. Their rituals a melancholy relic of Enlightenment dreams, while the Illuminati haunts as spectral meme, a cautionary ghost in the machine of global suspicion. In their modern interpretation, we confront our own veiled souls, seekers of light who thrive in darkness, heirs to secrets that liberate yet ensnare, and that enduring tension, born of history's unyielding gaze, whispers a lesson etched in stone and shadow alike. In the dimming hush of history's vast cathedral, where the echoes of oaths and edicts fade like smoke from a guttering candle, the Freemasons and Illuminati stand not as monolithic guardians of arcane power, but as fragile silhouettes etched against the relentless dawn of revelation. We have journeyed through their shadowed genesis, from the operative Masons' sweat-soaked guilds amid Europe's fractured spires, to Weishaupt's cloistered defiance in Bavaria's unyielding frost. We have dissected the core tempests of their rise, the revolutionary lodges where Franklin's quill danced with the square's unerring line, the Illuminati's ciphered congresses where rational fire licked at absolutism's throne. We have peeled back the philosophical veils, witnessing the speculative alchemy that turned stone tools into soul's compasses and reason's blade into contemplative steel, only to confront the modern distortions, books that twist fraternity into cabal, films that flicker with imagined omnipotence, pop culture's fevered debates, casting builders as eternal puppeteers. Yet now, as the narrative's embers cool in the midnight air, heavy with the scent of aged vellum and distant gunpowder, we linger on the precipice of introspection, where the weight of these societies presses upon the human spirit like the unseen hand of gravity, inevitable, profound, and achingly solitary. Consider the paradox that binds them across centuries. These were architects of light who dwelled in deliberate obscurity, preaching universal brotherhood, yet sealing truths behind veils that bred isolation and suspicion. The Freemasons, rising from the dust of medieval cathedrals, those Gothic behemoths piercing storm-torn skies like prayers frozen in stone, promised a moral edifice where every man might square his life to virtue's plumb, their rituals a sensory symphony of blindfolded stumbles across mosaic floors, the cool kiss of symbolic metal on flesh, the resonant gavel's strike unveiling not gold, but the raw geometry of the self. They evolved through the Enlightenment's tentative glow, their grand lodges in London's fog-shrouded alleys and Philadelphia's humid squares, fostering a syncretism that absorbed Egyptian obelisks and Kabbalistic whispers. Yet, in their ascent, they midwifed republics only to watch those same nations fracture under the irony of excluded voices. Women barred from the inner sanctum, enslaved souls petitioning in vain from the shadows of auction blocks. Human fragility pulsed at their core. Washington's trowel-laid cornerstone in 1793, amid the capital's nascent hush, consecrated a dream of ordered liberty. But the craft's silence on the chains that bound millions revealed the melancholy truth. Fraternity's blueprint, noble in intent, bent under the weight of unexamined hierarchies, a structure as imperfect as the hands that hewed it. And the Illuminati, that brief incandescent flare in the rationalist night, embodied an even sharper contradiction. Seekers of unclouded intellect who cloaked their doctrines in grades of secrecy, their Minerval owls gazing from moon-dappled groves as initiates recited deistic vows over sand-sculpted pyramids, the air thick with the rustle of Rousseau's pages and the faint acrid tang of hidden inks. Weishaupt's vision, forged in the orphan solitude of Ingolstadt's echoing quads, aimed to excise superstition's tumor from society's breast, infiltrating courts and salons with a fervor that echoed the 7 Years' War's lingering scars, fields still scarred by cannon fire, minds scarred by clerical edicts. Yet their philosophical evolution, from radical excision to Weishaupt's exiled meditations on death's quiet terror, exposed the soul's inherent shadows. Reason's light, so pure in theory, ignited not utopia but the guillotine's crimson arc, their suppression in 1785 a brutal reminder that Enlightenment's blade cuts both ways, liberating thought while chaining its bearers to perpetual exile. The irony deepens in their spectral afterlife, survivors scattering like autumn leaves into Masonic folds. Their doctrines seeding Hegel's dialectical storms and positivism's cold machinery, yet twisted by Barruel's fevered memoirs into the archetype of hidden tyranny, a phantom that haunts modernity's disquiet without ever fully materializing. This history, then, is no mere chronicle of cloaked cabals, but a mirror held to our collective frailty. The brutality of an age where religious war's blood-soaked fields gave way to ideological guillotines, and the grandeur of speculative dreams clashed with the melancholy of unfulfilled oaths. Sensory ghosts linger, the creak of lodge doors in revolutionary taverns where pipe smoke veiled plots against kings, the chill draught of Bavarian raids, scattering ciphered letters like fallen stars, the modern flicker of screens in darkened rooms, where conspiracy's allure draws us into the same veiled hunger that birthed these societies. Psychologically, they reflect our eternal dance with the unknown, the human ache for order amid chaos, for connection in isolation, for light that does not blind. In seeking to build empires of the mind, Freemasons with their moral temples, Illuminati with their rational republics, they unearth the paradox of secrecy itself. A shield that protects wisdom also imprisons it, fostering suspicion where trust was intended, enlightenment where fear prevailed. History's forensic gaze reveals not villains or saviors, but men, Ashmole hoarding alchemical curios in royalist exile, Weishaupt trembling in Thuringian woods, grappling with the soul's dual nature, their legacies a testament to ambition's quiet cost. As we draw the curtain on this odyssey, let the weight settle like midnight dew on ancient stone. These societies remind us that true mystery lies not in hidden rites or suppressed edicts, but in the human heart's veiled chambers, where the quest for truth inevitably entwines with shadow. They built not to dominate, but to endure. They whispered not to deceive, but to defy the darkness. Yet, in that defiance, they teach a profound lesson, etched in the unyielding lines of compass and pyramid. In pursuing light, we court the very obscurity that defines us. The Freemasons and Illuminati fade into the archive's hush, their paradoxes enduring like stars in a storm-swept sky. Beacons of what we might become, warnings of what we cannot escape. And in their eternal vigil, history whispers back, the greatest secrets are those we carry within, unlocked not by oath or cipher, but by the fragile courage to face the dawn alone.